Hello, it's Catherine again with Cat Math Tutoring. Last time we talked about adding integers, and today we're going to talk about subtracting integers. So I just wanted to remind you, last time we talked about adding integers, and there were two main cases. If you have numbers with the same sign, like two positive numbers that you're adding together, you just add those amounts together. It's like adding some money together. $5 plus $3, $8 altogether. Or if you add two piles of debt, you're going to end up with more debt. -$5 plus -$3, you have a debt of $8. Now, case two is if you have money with different amounts. So what I'm trying to say is if you have $5 of money and $3 of debt, those are two numbers with different signs. If you have different signs, you subtract the number parts, like 5 take away 3 is 2, but you keep the sign of the larger number, in this case 5, because you have more positive money than debt. Now, in this other case, here you have more debt than you have money. So when you subtract the number, again, you get 2, but you want to keep the sign of the larger number, which is the negative sign because the 5 is larger than the 3 in this case. So you still have $2 of debt. So there was a poem that went with this. When we were adding integers, we could think, if the numbers have the same sign, you add and keep that common sign. But different signs you subtract. Keep the sign of the larger number, then you'll be exact. But today we're going to talk about subtracting integers. So when you subtract integers, there are a couple ways to think about it. In this video, I'm going to talk about subtracting integers in general, maybe the more traditional way. My next video, I'm going to talk about another way to subtract integers, and it's more of a fun game way. So we'll do that next. But today, let's talk about two basic examples. So one example is if you have a certain amount of money, let's say $5, and you're going to subtract some money. So if you start with $5 and then you subtract $2, well, when you subtract $2, your net worth is going to go down. You don't have as much money as you started with. You started with $5, subtracting 2, you're going to have $3. But another way to think of subtraction is you can think of subtraction as adding debt. So subtracting money is like adding debt. So since I've changed this to an addition problem, I can use the rules I did before, where I have two numbers with different signs. I subtract the number and I get 3, and I attach the sign of the larger number, which in this case is 5. So notice when I'm subtracting debt, my net worth is going to go down. I started with 5, but my net worth goes down to 3. So often I don't change a problem like this to an addition problem, but that's one way that you can think about it. You can think about, instead of subtracting money, you are adding debt to your account. So a little trickier way to see this same example is maybe you start with -5. So what if you start with debt and then you subtract money? So remember, if you're subtracting money, your net worth is going down. So one way to think about it is just to leave it like this. And you started with $5 of debt, but now you're going down even in more debt by $2. So now at the end of the day, your net worth is going to be -7. You have more debt than you started with. You started with -5, but you're losing $2 more. That's one way to think about it, or a lot of people will change this subtraction sign into adding debt. So you can think about it like this too. You start with -$5, but instead of subtracting money, it's the same thing as adding a pile of debt. So now you have $5 of debt and $2 more of debt. So now altogether you have $7 of debt. So a couple ways to think about subtraction. Now there's also this case. Sometimes you have $5, but you're subtracting a negative amount. So what does this mean? You're subtracting debt. So remember, if you're subtracting debt, your net worth is going to go up. You're getting rid of that debt, so your net worth is going to be going up. You're going to be getting more money at the end. So another way to write this, if I'm subtracting debt, this is like adding money to my account. So I can rewrite this problem as I started with $5, but I'm getting rid of this $2 of debt. I'm adding $2. So I'm going to end up with more money at the end. I'm going to have $7. So usually when I have this opposite of a negative sign, I often will rewrite the problem with a plus sign just to make my work look a little simpler. Let's look at this other example. What if I start with -5 and then I'm going to subtract -2? So remember, I'm not changing the sign on this number. I'm starting with -$5 of debt. Now, if I start with -5, this is the opposite of a negative. The opposite of debt is like adding money. My net worth is going to go up. So here I have -$5 of debt plus $2. So now they have different signs. When I subtract the number parts, I end up with $3. And I'm going to keep the sign of the bigger number, which is -5. So that's the way we were thinking about it when we were adding integers. But another way to think about it here is I start with $5 of debt, but instead of subtracting debt, I'm going to be adding money to my account. So my net worth is going to go up. I started with -$5, but when I add $2 more to my account, now I only have debt of $3. So let's try some of these examples. Subtraction is difficult because there are so many different ways to think about it. I can't wait to show you my next method of looking at these using what I call the pew-pew game. So let's take a look at some of these. Oh, and before I forget, I wanted to give a shout out to mathtrails.com. This is where I'm getting these worksheets, and I find they're very helpful. They have a website online that you can go to, and you can print out all sorts of different kinds of worksheets, and they have the answers as well. So if I look at this problem right here, the first one, here I'm starting with $10, but then I have subtracting -$14. So when I'm subtracting debt, that means I'm adding money. My net worth is going to go up. So I can rewrite this problem as 10 plus 14. And then that makes it a lot easier to look at. So that would just be $24. Let's take a look at this one. Here I'm starting with $13 of debt. I'm already starting in debt, and then I'm losing $3 more. So I'm going farther in debt. I can rewrite this as -13 plus $3 of debt if I'd like to. I often don't rewrite these problems. I just think about it as I'm already $13 in debt and I'm losing 3 more. So the total amount of debt I'm going to have is -$16. Let's see, which one should we do next? Let's try, I find most people have trouble with something like this. Here, I'm already down $9 and I'm losing $11 more. So altogether, I have even more debt than I had before. So this is going to be -$20. How about this one? Here, I'm starting with $1 and then the opposite of debt is adding money. This is the same thing as 1 plus 5. Remember, when you are subtracting debt, your net worth is going up. So I started with $1 and I'm going up $5. So my total amount of money is 6. Let's take a look at this one. This looks complicated. So here I'm starting with -$12. The sign of this number doesn't change. This is how much debt I start with. But this opposite of a negative or subtracting debt, that means my net worth is going to go up. This is like -$12 plus $3 more. So I started with -$12 of debt, but I'm adding $3 more to my account, so I don't have as much debt as I started with. So now this is -$9. So again, I would have you practice some of these. Don't do all of them at once, but just do a couple of these each day. And then also on mathtrails.com, they have some worksheets that have both addition and subtraction in one worksheet. So you can kind of flip-flop between the two different operations. So coming up next is the pew-pew game. So I'll see you then.